in the community. It is fun to go from attraction to attraction. Why always ride the roller coaster if you could instead, I don't know, go on, I don't know, like, what other things are in a theme park? You get the drift. Secondly, well, it made me make peace with what CK3 is. I wanted the game to become something different, leaning into history and roleplay, and I grew frustrated that the game was meandering into seemingly confused directions, when in reality, like I mentioned, it was holding steady. The franchise, as I look at it now, is not primarily defined as roleplay, strategy, or history, but rather as a theme park. And to that primary definition, it stayed true the entire time. CK3 Nomads, for example, are much like CK2 Nomads, not a well-rounded design at all, as detailed above. Looking at All Under Heaven, the same thing can be said about the Mandala government, the Wanua government, and the Celestial government to a lesser degree. They are mountains that you climb, reach the summit of, and then move on to a different attraction, instead of being designed around being able to exist within those societies for hundreds of years. If this is the design, the onus is then on the player to decide whether they enjoy attraction hopping or not. Playing video games is about fun. For my part, once I let go of my hopes and dreams, which wasn't nearly as negative of an experience as I'm making it sound here for comedic purposes, I was just, you know, having fun. What's more, CK2 hardly differed in this design intent, as I said earlier. What then satisfied players like myself was the fact that modders like those behind the amazing historical immersion project had so much freedom, provided by the development team, to push and pull the game into a much slower, historically grounded modded direction. CK3 still is unbelievably friendly to be modded and has produced some incredible mods already. While there is nothing quite like HIP yet, the gateways to create something much more than even that are swung open wider than ever before. So I am taking Vanilla CK3 more for what it is than I think I did ever before, back when I was lamenting that it didn't do the stuff that I really wanted it to do. What this means for this review is that my attitude when judging content has changed and that this will be reflected in whether I recommend content or not. So, lange Rede, kurzer Sinn. Where previously I would have focused on new content implementing holistic gameplay loops, I no longer expect CK3 to do this. My focus is now on how fresh and fun the theme park attractions added are. I wanted to clarify both of these, because one of them made me enjoy the game more and the other one, the DLC policy, made me quite sad about it. But both of these I wanted to put out and tell you about them so that you know where I'm coming from and can consider these type of things yourself as well. And with that, we are finally in the part of this video that focuses on All Under Heaven. Let's start with the things that were added to the game in the free update. For one, we have the addition of all of East Asia and East Africa's coastline all the way down to Zanzibar, of course, as well as the total rework of CK3's terrain. One of my big fears here rested on these areas being squished in the projection, but they look great and are easy to play in. As somebody that has played a lot of EU5 recently that has a, forgive me, very ugly and squished terrain map in comparison, CK3 excels here both in the shape of the land, but also in the new textures. The new map is absolutely gorgeous, making previously neglected areas much prettier and delivering a beautiful and unique feeling to East Asia in particular. This goes, of course, hand in hand with any and all art assets added by this update. As always, in every single Paradox game, the artists of CK3 must be protected at all costs, as they are delivering incredible and lovely work at all times. In fact, Fred Wester and Alexander Altner, if you are seeing this, and I know you are, please give all Crusader Kings 3 artists a pay rise of at least 1000%. While the map itself is beautiful and well done, it has to be said that if you are just talking about the free update, the gameplay in those areas is utterly miserable. Different from, for example, Victoria 3 delivering thinned down versions of treaties and power blocks to players that do not own the DLCs, CK3 fully forgoes this option now, simply turning all realms in the area as feudal and tribal. Still, the addition of East Asia to the map is something that has even won somebody like me over. Listening to my friends from Vietnam, China, Korea and Japan, for example, talking about how excited they are to see their region as playable and represented better than in virtually any other piece of interactive media is heartwarming. Well, I can't say I agree with the developers that, for example, trade is only possible if we add China as well. I have no truly negative feelings about the map expansion now that East Asia is actually here. Having the option to, for example, pivot any campaign into East Asia is exciting and fun, and as we will see later, the additional gameplay systems have designs behind them that, even if sometimes botched in this release, are promising attractions. All in all, East Asia is gorgeous, and I'm glad that it has joined the CK3 family. Being able to travel all over the old world does have something magical to it. While we are speaking of the map expansion, it should of course also be mentioned that Paradox legitimately did an amazing job at maintaining performance. Personally, of course, I'm on a rather good CPU anyway, but I did not find that performance massively deteriorated, meaning that the dev diary that explained all the work that had gone into that part of the update has indeed made good on the promises made. Now, moving on, another free change was the introduction of formalized house relations. Whereas feuds between houses were already introduced with Friends and Foes free patch back in 2022, house relations finally cement these relations instead of having them feel rather random. But these relations are great design that can continue spinning the yarn between two families for several generations, the interface here is sadly a disaster. It is easily possible to amass a large number of house relations with people that you will swear you never had anything to do with, leading to you ignoring this tab entirely. Still, this is of course a mistake, as the options one gets if one pushes the house relations to either extreme are quite beneficial and shouldn't be ignored. What this feature needs more than anything are filters based on the actual relationship, length of existing house relationship, and of course, the actual bar depicting where one is with that family in the house relations window proper. The feature is good, but currently rather nebulous in a game that otherwise tends to list out every single factor that can impact, for example, a phase of the dynastic cycle. The innovation system also got a light facelift, now taking things such as cultural acceptance into account and letting one research innovations before entering the era of that innovation itself. But honestly, I don't think that the revamp here changes the equation in any meaningful way. It's a bit of a lateral move. A hidden addition in the free patch that is arguably quite nice is the fact that the Byzantine Empire, if one does own roads to power, also now utilizes the treasury mechanic added with this update. This is awesome, considering that the Byzantines arguably were the only European realm at the time with a genuine state institution. The long-term balancing effects of this aren't really clear yet to me, but working with corruption and the treasury may finally lead to the Byzantines being in a rather precarious position in play going forward. This would make playing them quite a lot more exciting, rather than simply bashing in heads as the behemoth that they were until now. For the last two important elements added with the free patch, let us discuss something that is connected to the DLC content but also accessible without it: natural disasters and great projects. This mechanic attempts to bring some added challenges to the table by requiring players and surrounding vassals to first survive a great natural disaster, such as an earthquake or a flood, and then indeed successfully rebuild the region. This mechanic has two adjacent mechanics in other games. That is, CK2's and Imperator Rome's Great Works, as well as Victoria 3's Harvest Conditions. What we have here, at least as far as natural disasters are concerned, is essentially a less dynamic version of CK3's Diseases. It isn't bad, but it isn't anything to write home about either. Some level of integration into the underlying narrative streams would have been great, but disasters already naturally influence the DLC's dynastic cycle. They surely should have also have an impact, such as a higher chance of heresy spreading, supernatural associations, but also sometimes something as significant as a total shift in the seat of power of a realm. An interesting case here, for example, is the total destruction of Amalfi in the tsunami of 1343 that sealed the fate of a once-proud merchant city forever. In reality, natural disasters are currently little more than opportunities to exchange money for other resources and even contribute to the great project. The mechanic is fine, especially now that other dynastic cycle usable is extended contribution to the disasters themselves. Some nice stuff, obviously also adds the entirety of Asia, but by and large is kind of whatever. Now, onwards and upwards to the DLC, where of course the massive chunk of content is hidden behind. All Under Heaven comes with 4 primary pieces of content: China with its celestial government and the dynastic cycle, Japan with its fresh administrative government, Southeast Asia with the Wanhua and Mandala governments, and the Silk Road. Of course, there are also the meritocratic governments found in Korea and some other realms, as well as the meritocratic Khanate in, for example, the Great Liao. But as these are largely just slimmed down and slightly altered versions of the Chinese celestial government, I will be skipping them in this review. The primary purpose of the meritocratic government, in my opinion, is to free the entirety of East Asia of the standard feudal government, only leaving a single island in Korea for it. This is, no matter what, a good decision, as it means that nobody in the region plays like a standard European country and instead heavily orients itself on the Chinese form of governance no matter what. Creating distance between gameplay in Europe and gameplay in East Asia is just fundamentally a good thing to make these attractions different enough. Let's begin with the smaller content areas away from China. First, we have the addition of the Silk Road. This mechanic draws the overland Silk Road trade routes from China all the way to the Byzantine Empire, but depicts the trade in those areas really only indirectly. While each Silk Road area phase comes with various minor modifiers for the countries that rule its territory, the primary point of this mechanic is to hand down Chinese-only innovations to other parts of the world. Mechanically, this Silk Road is significantly worse than the one that existed, for example, in CK2, as that one very heavily took localized conflicts into account, impacting the overall transfer of wealth very directly and instantly. This, of course, is an obvious side effect of traits simply not existing in CK3, but it should indeed be noted that the phases of the situation make the impact of, for example, a terrible war or disease much less direct and dynamic than it used to be in CK2, where such an event would be felt downstream the moment the war took place. Since it only happens here once the phase shifts, it feels very slow to respond to anything that is actually taking place. Me waging war and ravaging the entire Silk Road area is only felt when the phase changes rather than right away. It just doesn't feel that rewarding to mess with. Now, grabbing innovations from the Silk Road is honestly a chore. I don't really care about the logistics and cost attached to picking things up here, but want to mostly point out that I do wish I at least had the option of sending an adventurer the same way that I can send one to retrieve an artifact from me from faraway lands. Not for realism purposes, but rather because traveling that far is pretty annoying. What's more, needing to then pass the skill check to actually collect the innovation one desires is something that I'm absolutely certain players will safe scum quite a lot. Attaching random chance to this type of investment has never really felt good. Regardless, some of the innovations are cool and grabbing them can make for some nice cheeky gameplay. Lastly, I don't think that the AI actually undertakes these travels currently, so it is a virtually player-only mechanic. Or rather, I am yet to spot a single culture that is not mine ever picking up these technologies if the only way that they would be eligible for it would be traveling to a Silk Road market. The mechanic itself has a really nice UI, has a couple of innovations that will make a game more fun, but largely, well, can't really do much of anything without trade playing any role. Obviously, of course, the Maritime Silk Road is completely absent as well. I am looking forward to this feature being more fun once trade is actually in the game. Secondly, we have the Wanua and Mandala governments of East Asia. These governments belong together as Wanua, while technically very similar to the classic tribal government, can be easily reformed into the Mandala government. Logically, the Wanua government comes with gameplay limitations very similar to the ones of the Mandala government. What makes this government interesting in theory is that you can both raid and barter. Bartering is a new form of army stance that is friendly in nature. You take your army, make your way through lands owned by others, and bring home loot. In practice, it is effectively just more boring raiding. Since it is friendly, you don't engage in combat, meaning that you never live with the fear of potentially getting crushed by your target's army. Now, it does give some opinion and counter modifiers, but those hardly make this engaging. The feature itself could be made a lot more interesting if long-standing barter relationships impacted cultural acceptance, allowed for trade agreements, actual trade agreements, not just event-based, allowed for easier conversion, and or made it much easier to reform one's own religion, become a tributary, and achieve marriages, and so on. So the potential is clearly there, but the implementation is whatever. Luckily, Wanua is not intended to be a permanent government for anybody, as any player wants to quickly graduate into the Mandala government. The Mandala government then has a lot more to offer. The design of this government is such that the player holds only very little land directly, and instead works through a network of tributaries that pledge allegiance based on the character's Mandala radiance. Increasing this metric comes with two primary elements. The player has to upgrade their capital temple complex via a great project, and they have to upgrade their chosen Mandala aspect. The Mandala aspect one chooses defines the playstyle in this government thoroughly, as progression is directly connected with finishing what effectively amounts to quests. Upgrading the capital temple complex functions via the Great Project mechanic. Once a project for an upgrade is started, various contributions need to be made, including one that is essentially the same requirement as upgrading a Mandala aspect, meaning that one necessitates the other to be completed as well. This gameplay system generally presents the player with fun challenges, as the chosen Mandala aspect generally represents a radically different style of play than any other Mandala aspect. As these aspects are effectively intergenerational, performing very well as a character means that your next character can go further, literally raising the achievable level of devotion. You are on the rails for a good amount of time, building up your empire. Seeing your radiance grow, new tributaries pledging themselves to you, and other guard kings getting shattered via a special casus belli without a doubt is fun. The government mostly suffers from the fact that tributaries each keep to themselves, as they are not technically vassals. This means that there is a notable absence of factions and caring about other characters in general. This very much does fit the theme. After all, you are a guard and they are not. It also means that CK3's strongest element, the interpersonal relationships, fall a bit short. I would love to see the Godhood Mountain be made more interesting by movements like China has them. Maybe some tributaries are especially zealous, while others view you as a reincarnation of an evil demon, so they try to shift public perception of you and your family as much as you are. Additionally, I would have loved it if the quests needed to level up your aspect were more malleable. They suffer from the same finality that Coronation Oaths suffer from. You either succeed fully or you don't succeed at all. But of course, the scale of failure between a lazy drunkard not even trying to win 10 wars is different from a good commander that wins 9 of the required 10. I'd also like it if some of the quests didn't require sitting through mandatory events and activities. Much like for Oaths, I feel like making players sit through a set number of feasts just isn't fun. I know all those events by heart by now. Still, the aspects are varied and allow you to climb that mountain from different angles depending on how you're feeling. The system generally is a fun attraction, a change of pace from regular gameplay. Now, moving on, we come to my favorite system in the entire DLC, Japan. The historical situation in Japan is an exciting one, as it sits firmly between a system of formal governance in which a central authority, and effectively a status in the making, but distant power holders are plotting to turn their assignments into hereditary fiefs that will allow them to wear down and eventually destroy the state in favor of a system of personal relationships akin to feudalism. In short, in this society, the player is given a number of choices trying to climb the mountain. They can choose to stay loyal to the Regency system or betray it, establish their own fief, and overthrow the whole administration as a whole. The third hidden path, of course, is to raise itself up as the actual Yamato dynasty in an attempt to bring back power into the hands of the dynasty rather than the regents. Implementing a system like this one, in which there is an actual temporal power holder and another that is an entirely ceremonial figurehead, is not unheard of in CK3, but it was a difficult task nonetheless, considering the incredible importance that the Imperial House plays in the cultural and religious Japanese mindset. The house relations I discussed earlier in the free patch get enhanced even further in Japan by organizing the many facets of the house blocks. These house blocks are a bit finicky, but overall great fun. Since most vassals in Japan by default will only really ever hold a singular county, gameplay without house blocks would have been extremely tedious. Imagine convincing 15 counts to join your faction only for each of them having about 100 troops to their name. Instead, the blocks neatly organize factions, assign a leadership role to one person that can be challenged by other block members, and makes it clear where the borders inside of Japan are drawn, should any power struggle occur. The Japanese system plays into all of the strength of Crusader Kings 3. You have a heavy focus on maintaining good personal relationships with other families to further your plots and your house block. You also get to build up a domicile and can decide your allegiance to the Ritsuryo governance system on the fly. It is awesome to see that you can choose the bandit route, in which you illegally declare yourself a Soryo ruler, so a hereditary ruler. Or you could request permission to turn your fief hereditary instead. The options that you have here to make your way to the top of this particular mountain are quite wide, and allow a large variety of playthroughs. The direct connections and emphasis on familial relations are excellent, and neatly showcases a historical phenomenon of how a central government can lose power. In my time with this gameplay system, I generally really enjoyed it, as it leans so heavily into what makes CK3 fun. Still, there are of course some downsides as well. Coming into the system as an outsider feels odd. I know what you're thinking, well maybe it should, given how isolated the islands of Japan are, but that isn't really what I mean. You're both accepted as one of their own extremely quickly, rather than an upstart house of foreigners that shouldn't really have any family crowns to boast with, but simultaneously will also struggle to get a house block going. The house blocks in general can also be rather finicky. Primarily, they work by maintaining great familiar relations with other houses, which intuitively feels great. But another thing that can impact the cohesion of a house block quite massively are family aspirations. These aspirations, to be frank, are primarily boring modifiers, different from the gameplay-altering aspirations of the Mandala government in comparison. So, needing to ensure that all house block members all use the same modifier feels extremely arcadey and tedious, but is required as your block will otherwise fall apart. I get the intent here, but think it would be nicer if aspirations mattered more and houses took more hierarchical relations with one another that must be maintained to keep the block in line. Lastly, it can be nice, but finicky, to restore the power of the Imperial House of Yamato, which is very much a player option for anybody playing the Chrysanthemum Throne. This is a fun playthrough, as it requires you to hoist up your relatives and allied houses, rather than seeking direct power initially. You do this until you have a house block strong enough to raise yourself onto the throne via a restoration war. This mechanic is cool and can even lead to playthroughs in which a player purposely tries to assist the Tenno in rising up rather than establishing themselves as Kampaku or playing the Tenno himself. Japan as a whole is the most well-rounded system added in this expansion, allowing you to play the same area differently just because of its systemic complexity. It also allows you to play in Japan for centuries as not necessarily the highest person, because you can change the course of Japan just with your house block. If you want to play a house loyal to the central administration, for example, you might even attempt to strike down upstart Soryo rulers to return the title back into administrative hands, where Soryo rulers will attempt to eat their way through Japan. Climbing this mountain over and over again definitely is something this system makes very viable and very fun. And that brings us to the biggest and last part of this expansion, the Son of Heaven and all underneath him, China. The system of governance introduced in China is complex as it primarily relies on landless bureaucratic gameplay and utilizes firm hurdles that will stop you from progressing in your career as an official unless you pass certain exams. The idea here is that you make your way up the career ladder all in service of the eternal Huangdi, the Emperor. China is inarguably a very special historical case as it had a complex and firmly developed state institution different from the vast majority of other countries at the time. Additionally, the Huangdi enjoys a much more privileged position in the mindset of even the most rebellious vassals. This means that hereditary titles, as well as civil wars in China, are essentially not a thing, because challenging the authority of the Son of Heaven in such an open way is completely unthinkable. Let's evaluate China based on the Group 1 interacts with it as. First, let's talk about being an outsider. Frankly, I love it. I think this is excellent. Whether you are a nomadic ruler looking to subdue the great lands of China despite the Son of Heaven sitting atop his throne, or any given outsider trying to capitalize on China freshly falling apart, interacting with China feels special and allows for massive wars with potentially region-changing consequences. Equally, becoming a tributary of China is a cool roleplay feature that also comes with some nice mechanical implementations, while not locking the entire region into a stalemate in which no wars are possible because everybody gets tributized by China and then protected by the Emperor. They don't. Similarly, being able to declare war on Chinese vassals without the Chinese Emperor being guaranteed to join is also a great experience, giving more tools to outsiders. Lastly, another very cool feature here is the fact that you can, essentially, worm your way into the dynastic cycle as a tributary by altering your contract to include palace access after acquiring a seal of investiture. I really enjoy playing adjacent to China. There is so much roleplay, there is so much history in this, and the mechanics actually support all of it. It is really well done. Next up, let's talk about the top participant, the Son of Heaven. Playing the Emperor himself is, as it virtually always is when you begin on top of the mountain in CK3, a rather easy affair. There are plenty of mechanics to interact with, such as great projects, your treasury policies, your movements, and ensuring that, indeed, the dynastic cycle does not turn against you. While I have struggled, as described, to find massive challenges in all of this, this is the first time that I feel like CK3 actually managed to create something akin to civilizational gardening. What I mean here is that China is a malleable society. You hardly ever, as the Huangdi, lead any efforts directly. Instead, you direct and decide where efforts are meant to go. This clearly was the guiding feature design philosophy behind the Celestial Government. I like starting a grand campaign, funneling treasury to the leading commander, and then, if he needs it, command a military governor to assist with the campaign. I really enjoy favoring certain movements, which may well allow me to then go on and change the bureaucracy of China into one controlled by families, rather than by the genuine merit of individuals. CK3 has attempted to strike a balance here for a while now, creating what I would call indirect jobs in, for example, regencies and administrative governments, but has finally made something fun in the form of the Huangdi. I can't say I love being a regent to this day, for example, as the system is rigid and my actual faculties are very limited, but the Huangdi has a lot of different approaches available to him to alter China in a lasting way. Similarly, while it is too easy unless the player limits themselves, China now offers something to top-tier players that isn't pure blobbing. You get to garden your underlings the same way Victoria 3 lets you garden your nation. I do feel that, similar to the Mandala government, interpersonal relations are hardly ever playing a role for the Huangdi. It is exceedingly easy to not remember a single character that you ever interacted with, as factions basically play no role, and governors, chancellors, and movement leaders change extremely frequently. CK3 delivers a strong state management experience compared to anything done before in the series. but also makes it so that the heroic Chinese general or the chancellor loyalist or, for example, the biggest enemy won't carry any weight in your memory of a playthrough as a 1D. Look, this is one of the more enjoyable top-level jobs in CK3 as far as I'm concerned. Probably my favorite. This brings us now to the last group of participants, and by far the largest group, literally everybody within the hegemony of China. The career within China is pretty straightforward. The children's exam, the local exam, the capital exam, and finally the palace exam are all hard thresholds that you must pass or you will be unable to take on higher positions. This means that you have a set of mandatory examinations that you will want to participate in if you have comparatively high ambitions. The general gameplay loop then progresses into you taking on more and more positions, eventually culminating in whatever the highest position is that you can reach. Here you can choose between a civilian and a military career. As you progress, you will eventually leave landed positions behind and ascend to being directly on the council of the 1D. In general, this gameplay loop suffers massively from the fact that, similar to the 1D's experience, you will hardly build any actual relationships with other characters that would make them more memorable. Quite the opposite, as you will be landless for a good portion before then gaining titles anywhere in China, swiftly followed by moving governorship and gaining a title somewhere completely different in China. Your administrative lieges and vassals basically do not matter at all, unless you subscribe to the idea of just holding one particular governorship for the rest of your life. The game attempts to rectify this with the introduction of movements, which act as the substitute for regular factions and vassal bondages. However, allegiances here can shift so quickly and constantly that, again, actually keeping track of people and building lasting relationships is a rarity. You have to proactively pursue this if you want to make it happen. There's also an elder and disciple system, but, well, this doesn't contribute to any actual personal relationships either. Instead, it acts virtually entirely as a boost to one's merit and movement power, as well as the basic interaction selection one has for contacts as a landless ruler when making a request. This loneliness in a sea of characters makes the experience as either a saboteur of the Son of Heaven or a great loyalist very unremarkable when it comes to recognizing faces. What's more, when engaging with the exams and the movement debates about who should become the next movement leader, it quickly becomes obvious that there just are not that many events for these activities, which is tragic considering just how mandatory both of these activities are to any Chinese playthrough. Whereas most activities are largely optional, these two are not, so repetition of events with characters that you have no relationship with whatsoever are extremely common. A large chunk of Chinese vassal gameplay is waiting for gaining a position, for exams to be hosted, and for decisions to influence the dynastic cycle to become available in a different phase. Should your character ascend to the position of one of the 1D's counselors, you will find that your tools are largely just limited to the version of the toolset that the 1D has personally. What the chancellery of the 1D is missing is some type of legitimate council mechanic, so that the councillors actually have a platform of their own, or at least anything that makes the members of the council care about one another, and give them more actions than about 1/10 of what the 1D has available. I got the most entertainment out of choosing a military career for what it is worth, as those positions are much more hands-on than any other. You get to wage wars and even gain access to a casus belli for internal wars, should China be in a phase of tension. I would highly recommend choosing this path compared to a pure civilian one, but highlight that I don't mean to say, wow, I really miss wars if I'm not playing a military guy, but rather the breadth of things that I can do as a military governor are, well, it's simply bigger. Largely, playing as a Chinese vassal is a miss for me, not because of any base design here, but because the repetition and the anonymity of my compatriots bogs down what otherwise is extremely interesting political design. China as a whole, including the dynastic cycle, offers a lot of opportunities to engage with the realm as a society rather than as individual characters, and that is indeed quite interesting. Still, outside of the 1D's amazing abilities to shape the society, I feel that these systems need to do more work to personalize what you do and who you do it to. Movements gaining their own policies that one can set and change instead of having firmly decided abilities per dynastic cycle phase, and the chancellery having internal policies and mandates so that councillors can sabotage each other would assist this greatly. So, in conclusion, I think that all three of the major theme park attractions that CK3 adds here are hits, but the Mandala Garden is the most two-dimensional, it isn't bereft of fun, as you can block relentlessly. China offers a lot of opportunities and promises the role of the top page from an angle that is more interesting than CK3 has managed to do it ever before, but being a subject of the hegemony is rather dull in comparison. Japan is the most well-rounded and pathway-rich government added in this patch, and while finicky in various aspects, is very hands-on at all times. combining the more administrative gameplay with classic landed gameplay. As I said earlier in this video, I feel strongly about various elements surrounding CK3, but taking CK3 for what it is, a theme park experience in which I can opt out of an attraction whenever I feel like it, hop around in the world and find something else to do, I recommend the content this DLC adds. With the downsides in mind, the attractions here are generally worth your time.
Europa Universalis 5 is the largest and possibly grandest Paradox Grand strategy game. So grand, in fact, it can be tough to know exactly where to begin. So, what do you need to know before unpausing EU5? Hello everyone, I am Benjamin Magnus, and I will be your tutor, scholar, marshal, and envoy in this series of tutorials. Joining me is our friend Little Boris. He will be bouncing around the screen and helping me point out useful information. In this video, we'll be covering core mechanics and UI in EU5. This will serve as an absolute beginner guide. And in the description below, you'll be able to find timestamps to all the information we cover in case you're looking for something specific. Something to keep in mind as we progress through this tutorial is that this video is being produced on an active development build of EU5. That means depending on when you watch the video, what you see in the tutorial and what you see on the screen might vary slightly. Before we go too much further, there's one setting that I want to cover because it may have a large impact on your gameplay, either performance-wise or aesthetically, and that is flat map mode. As you can see, the world of EU5 is rendered in 3D. If you zoom out a distance, it will change to a flat map. There is a setting that you can alter that will change how that behaves. If we hit escape and go into our settings and then to our map tab, it is listed right here as flat map mode and defaults to zoomed out, which is the behavior we just saw. If you simply change it to always and then save it, when you zoom in, you will only see the flat map. It will never render the full 3D map. If you're seeing some performance issues, switching to flat map mode may make the game run better. And some people just like the older school style of the flat map mode even when you're zoomed in. Of course, all these settings are entirely up to you. I personally do enjoy flat map mode because it gives me an aesthetic I like, and I like to pair it with mouse over for province names. Throughout this tutorial, though, we will be using close to the default settings because it's what you will be seeing when we load up the game before making any changes. We will be going through this tutorial as hungry, so if you'd like to follow along, click a new game and start a new game. For starters, we're just going to cover the UI that you'll see when you start up the game. In the upper left, you'll have the character portrait for your current game. Covering over most every element of the game, we bring you up a few clips with more information. And on most UI elements, a left click and a right click will give you different actions. Here on our king's character portrait, you can see his culture, religion, and ability stats. You can see he's a ruler, he's 49 years old, and a male. We also have his traits here. Covering over any item will give you further information about it. We can see that the Bold Fighter trait gives him 20% increased army initiative and monthly progress towards the offensive societal value. We'll cover what this stuff actually means later, but for now, we just need to know that it's here. We can also see a list of his titles, and a little bit of further information about him like his location, his spouse, his children, and the history of his titles. Left-clicking will bring up the full character panel for him, and right-clicking will bring up a quick action. Next is your country's flag. This will change dynamically depending on how you progress the game. We can see that we are a monarchy, we are a settled country, and we are a kingdom right. Here you can see the term ruler, heir, capital, number of locations, pops, tax base, primary culture, and the size of our standing army, and but then you can see that the left click will bring the government panel, and the right click will open the country. This number here is basically your high score in the game. You can see a breakdown of where that score is coming from by hovering over it. The next few panels represent your estates. In this case, the Hungarian nobility, Hungarian clergy, the Hungarian burghers, and the Hungarian commoners. The bar represents their current level of satisfaction, and the number represents the change in satisfaction over time. Hovering over any of these will give you information about the estates. The next item is a pie chart that represents how much power is controlled by each estate. Here we can see that the crown, that's you, and the nobility, those are the rich guys, control most of the power in the country, with the rest being dispersed between the clergy, the burghers, and a small amount to the commoners. Next, we can see your treasury. This is represented by ducats. The top number is the amount of money you have stored, and the bottom number is your monthly income. Ducats are used for a number of things in EU5, like thriving estates or building buildings, and hovering over it will give us a breakdown of our expense sheet. Next, we have stability. Stability is kind of an extrapolation of public order, how happy the people in your country are to be living in. It will range on a scale from -100 to +100, with negative numbers giving your country debuffs and positive numbers giving your country a bonus. It is also used as sort of a currency, where you can trade stability for doing things like passing on laws. Here we have a positive stability, and you can see that we have a breakdown of all the bonuses that will impart your nation. Left clicking will bring up your economic balance sheet. You may be wondering why it does that. Well, it's simply because you can spend some of your hard-earned ducats to increase the monthly stability. Right-clicking will bring up your cabinet actions, which will go into great detail later. But there are things you can do in your cabinet actions to increase stability. Next, we have the population. You can see currently our total population is around 3.8 million, and we have a monthly pop increase of around 1,000. Hovering over the population number will give us a breakdown. Here we can see culture breakdown, religious breakdown, class breakdown, our top 5 locations, and our bottom 5 locations. You might also note that sometimes when you hover over things, you'll get a contextual change to the map mode showing you pertinent information on the map as well. In this case, hovering over the population shows you the population map mode. Next, we have legitimacy. Legitimacy, simply put, is a measurement of how legitimate your rule is. It is a scale from 0 to 100, with high legitimacy granting bonuses and low legitimacy granting debuffs. Here, you can see a breakdown of all of the bonuses imparted to us by having a relatively high legitimacy score, and below it, a breakdown of the monthly change. Prestige is a measurement of how wondrous your culture and nation is viewed from the outside world, and again is on a scale from 0 to 100. Again, with high numbers granting bonuses and low numbers granting debuffs. Same as with legitimacy, we can see our breakdown of bonuses or debuffs, and we can see where the monthly change is coming from. Do note that the left click and right click buttons on all of these UI elements are contextual. They will take you to the appropriate place based on what you're hovering over. Next, we have diplomats. Many diplomatic actions will require regular upkeep, like maintaining alliances or royal marriages, or improving relations and managing subjects. And here we have a breakdown of our maximum number of diplomats and our monthly change in number of diplomats. Next, we have war exhaustion, which is on a scale from 0 to 20, and is a measurement of how devastating the nation is by war. Now, this will tick up while you're at war, and will tick up faster when your nation is suffering from that war. High war exhaustion is bad, and will give many negative modifiers to your nation. You do not want this to tick up for too long. Next, we have manpower. As you can see, it's currently 0. That's because manpower represents your professional soldiery. And we are currently in the late medieval period, where most armies are completely composed of raised peasant levies. There is a distinct difference between peasant armies and professional armies in EU5. As the game progresses, we will move away from the levies, in most cases, and move into more professional soldiers. Something to note is that because we do not have access to the sea, we do not see our sailor count here. But if you do have access to the sea, there will be another tab. Next, we can find information about our current research. Hovering over it will give you information about how quickly you are researching a new tech, and clicking on it will open up the tech tree. Then you will find the current date, the play pause button, and the speed toggles 1 through 5. Here we can find information about what age we are in. Clicking the number will bring up our ages tab. An age is a roughly 100-year span of time in which specific tech trees are available. Advancing to the next age as soon as possible is important because it will unlock new technologies for you to research. Next, we have a series of buttons. This one will bring up the ledger, which is a breakdown of information in the game. Next is the Find tab. You can use it to search for something that you know the name of, but not the location of. Next, we have the Europedia, our inbuilt, legally distinct Wikipedia about all things Europa Universalis. Next, you have the Automation tab, where you can quickly turn on and turn off automation for everything that can be automated in the game. Next, we have a series of hints to help you play, the Agenda, which gives you historical context for the nation you're playing, and the main menu, which can also be accessed by pressing Escape. This section of the screen right here is the outliner. Anybody who's played a Paradox game before will be familiar with an outliner. It is a way to pin useful information that you personally would like to see at a glance. Pressing this button here will allow you to customize the outliner. You can pin or unpin information you do or do not want to see. Next, we have the news feed, which will show messages about what's going on in the world. If you do not wish to see this, you can simply click the lower right-hand button and it will toggle off. That brings us to the bottom of the screen. Docked at the bottom will have international organizations. An international organization is some form of cooperative between nations. We have two available to us right now. The first one being the Catholic Church, clicking on it will bring up the Catholic Church panel. And next we have the Hungarian-Croatian Union, which is a personal union between those two nations. Clicking on it will bring up the Personal Union I/O page. And this tab right here will show you all of the map modes available for the game. This bar is completely customizable as well. Across the bottom are the pinned map modes that you might find most useful. The other tabs will show you all map modes categorized. If you would like to pin or unpin something, you can do it by simply clicking on the star. And finally, back up at the top center, we have our notifications. Now, notifications are color-coded: blue, green, yellow, red, and purple, and are also categorized by severity, with things on the left being things you want to deal with right away, and things on the right you can deal with later safely. The larger purple tab will represent situations around the world that you have knowledge of. Here we have the rise of the Turks, which will track who takes over the Anatolian Peninsula during this age. Now, we skipped over this series of buttons because they all have immense amounts of information in them. But we're going to hit those now. Starting with the first button, we have our government panel. Now, this panel has 6 separate tabs in it, all with more information. We're going to hit the value tab first, just because it has the least amount of more tabs in it.